little loose, unfocused, and shocking recording. In short, filmmaking as a form of play. Getting friends to act wasn't easy. Everyone was busy. Next time I got some of them over was Snyx, 1993. I quickly thought of a spontaneous story about an ancient warlock, Snyx, who died centuries ago but left behind a mask.
Area spy would ask what you...
In the present day, the mask is discovered and possesses my friend with the warlock's spirit when he puts it on. He stalks me and tries to kill me. We made up the plot as we went along, but it was cut short when his mom called him home to dinner. After that, I had to complete his scenes by puppeteering the mask and close-ups only, and performing Snyx's voice myself. Again, it was complete garbage, but it survived. It's my oldest existing movie to feature live actors besides myself, and has become sort of, in a strange way, a classic of mine. His actors were never famous or available, in spite of his pleas. The filming of Dino Man from D4, 1994, rolled over from Saturday into Sunday and had to be abandoned because his friends just didn't want to do a second day. Night of Total Terror, 1996, was the first movie where James felt his friends wanted to be there. It was words of blatant rumors of the lost art.
What happened to you? He's unconscious, but he's breathing. Stay safe if you can.
Just another home movie. So I may have misrepresented the movie. In the constellation of all future autobiographies, training traditions, organization, geographic attempts to obfuscate murder, they make very disappointing play. It's not that kind of bad, but it is also incredibly self-destructive. As I went through its pages, I found myself tempted to make sweeping claims about how James sees the world, how he sees himself, but stopped when I realized that I couldn't tell the difference between
The wound.
that imply the total
It
lack
should
of
be fatal, but somehow he clings to life. I fear it will not be long until his song ends. He will never heal while the Count's binding still holds sway. Only by a Count's hand can this binding be released. I know an old tale, one that speaks of a ring we might be able to recover, buried 3 centuries ago in our ancient graveyard. A Count's signet ring bearing his rune of authority. But how to reach it in time? The grim tangle. The overgrown sinkholes and gullies that run beneath Bogham can lead you there. The path is dangerous, but go back to the Grellwood. Find the entrance. We shall see if the spirits of this land still have the will to see you through.
Oh my god. No, I missed that. Sorry.
instructive. The portrait painted by the book is one of a stagnant man with limited capacity to self-reflect, a poor understanding of how and why things happen the way they do, and a genuine lack of curiosity. A movie-making nerd compels us to conceptualize James Gunn as a revolutionary engineer, as a failed filmmaker. James Wolfe, the main character of the book, reflects back on the university 2 decades after the fact, and still has no insight into what the instructor was trying to impart. There are no lessons, not just flowing, that made sense. Later, there is no appreciation for the exposure across this community fundamentals, nothing to suggest that he was made to draw household objects with full precision. Draftsman gave him an appreciation for
Stay safe, if you can.
I heard you're heading for the village. When I fled for my life, there was no time for me to grab all my smithing tools. If you do manage to reach my forge, you should find them and bring them here. I'll set up a bench, and we can see about working on your equipment.
A story about a technical exercise in his first year of university, an assignment meant to familiarize students with the basic operation of the 16mm Rolex camera that hijacked in order to repay a night of total terror. His own framing of the story makes him look like an egomaniac. The assignment is to simply use the camera successfully.
Stick to the cairns.
James pitches an elaborate shoot with costumes and lighting. The instructor kindly explains that it's not that kind of assignment. James says he found the assignment annoying at the time, but on reflection, it was really valuable because it taught him to stand up for himself. Because he ignored the instructions, showed up on the day with a box full of Halloween costumes, and hijacked the entire class, and then the instructor just kind of caved because...
If the Fae spirits are still...
whatever. It's not entirely clear from the book.
The old magic still thrives. The way's open. Please, hurry. Yes?
His actors.
My mother and I would come here to gather mushrooms when I was young. Ervig the Druid, one of the Grellwood's resident mystics, would meet us and allow us entry. He was well versed in the tongue of old magics. But now, well, times certainly have changed. Please, don't eat any of the mushrooms. We need you alive. My mother and I would come here to gather mushrooms when I was young. Ervig the Druid, one of the Grellwood's resident mystics, would meet us and allow us entry. He was well versed in the tongue of old magics. But now, well, times certainly have changed. Please, don't eat any of the mushrooms. We need you alive. Move quickly.
He keeps remaking movies he made when he was a literal child.
Return to your grave!
And it ends with James doll. Boring anecdotes are interspersed with bizarre claims. Rooted entirely in an understanding of how the body states that in 1997 he got into you don't hear as much on the radio like Metallica. Metallica in 1997 was one of the biggest our age had Name drops King Nothing, a top 10 single on the US Hot 100 from an album that was #1 in 18 countries in a decade where people still bought albums. If you wanted to communicate the irony irony of a character in a film. Someone with a self-mythology of outsider status while ultimately being no less in step with extremely mainstream tastes. You would drape the character in a Metallica t-shirt. An editor would have caught this immediately. The actual substance of the book is largely a chronological catalog of over 24 of James's home movies, many of which are sequels and outright remakes of his own prior movies. In a roundabout way, this actually seems to have been the original impetus behind writing the book. So by evidence, I really mean James basically said it outright on page 150. Now the trauma is on page just deteriorating. I never digitized or preserved them since the tapes that had the final preservation, which I first wrote down while the incidents were still fresh in my mind. Weird, right? The admission that this was the catalyst that made me want to write a book in the first place. And that you're just adding stuff to something you started. Autobiography, a project in 2002, long before the days of his public success, and then just uncritically picked up 16 years later and just started tacking more onto as though the Snicks sextology, getting suspended for an academic year, and launching one of the most influential YouTube channels ever are all equally weighted events. The trauma he's referring to is an episode that consumed much of the middle of the book. Over 50 pages, about a sixth of the volume, are dedicated to James getting kicked out of university at the end of his first year.
This was once a man? Wall of flame!
About as unfair accusations that are guilt by association of things that was done.
will take you now.
I keep coming back to James's camera setup. The longer I stared at it, the more the beast consumed me. Why was it? What's going on? Does he even know? Maybe if I built it myself, if I held it in my hands, I could understand. Is this the fruit of obsession? Is this where compulsion takes us?
Now, druid.
Something kind of the same isn't enough. A half-assed, cynical...
Die, scum!
Created. It tells you nothing. James's board is plain and square, so my board must be. Replica, not just a joke. This thing is very strange to build, physically confounding at times. I'll admit that by the time my replica was complete, it felt more secure than I'd assumed from photos, but simultaneously precarious. I didn't think it was at risk of spontaneous self-destruction, but still there's a looming sense that I shouldn't push my luck. My screws had already started to bend during the tightening, so done was pretty much a done. The thing I struggled with from the very beginning, the thing my brain chafed against like cheap khaki, is that the end goal here, a camera head mounted to a board, isn't some far-off concept, isn't some radical use case. It's designed to do thousands of variety, seemingly none of them knew why. The head already has a hole in the bottom for a bolt. You can take the lumber and just drill a hole in it. In the industry, it's called a low hat. Cardalinium subplug made out of anodized aluminum for almost $600, but those aren't very popular. Everybody knows you can get away with $10 of wood and bolts. It's so simple, so straightforward that I can't stop making them. I keep drilling holes in wood and bolting camera heads to them. The thing that's confounding about it is that this is low-budget filmmaking. Like, that's right? Scrapping low-budget filmmaking, practical effects, all the movie magic that you can work with. Why is it so bad? I have been watching Angry Video Game Nerd episodes for days now. Myself sometimes uncertain about existed in a framework of network television where someone AVGN is one of those things. It is notice this, and maybe I'm even late to the party, but it occurs to me now as I psychologically wade hip deep through buffalo turds that AVGN is, at its heart, a skit show that uses the premise of video game reviews as more than a framing device. And as such, there's scant allegiance to the games themselves. But even that's not entirely true, because that would suggest a level of consistency that doesn't exist. Whatever ratio James and his co-writers are aware of that. Subject because they just kind of work the material. They've got a video worth of stuff. It is what it needs to be in order to exist. The nerd was never a sincere expression of James's obsessions. The nerd was always a character. The critiques are as authentic or performative as is convenient. Superficially, the membrane of performance makes AVGN as insight into James, but the hitch is that James just isn't a good enough writer to divest himself fully of the end product, to write organically in the voice and mind of the nerd. The way that James talks about
Quickly! My family has been abducted! That bastard tyrant Praetor Draven! He's taken my family hostage! They're being held somewhere beyond these gates. I never thought he would stoop this low. I sent for reinforcements, but it's been so long. I must get through the gate.
This man has known respect in his life, but now he is simply lost.
Yes? The Praetor. Oh, the Praetor! That monster! He is the worst man the Eternals could have chosen as a custodian for this territory. Had he come to us in peace, the clans might have been willing to talk, but that damn swine regards us as nothing but dogs. He invaded the village in the night without warning, without honor. He seized my family to try to force us to surrender. The Eternal Empire cares for nothing but power. Mark my words. We will not be ground under the heel of tyranny. Uprising? The uprising, of course. The clans are uniting to fight for their freedom. We are making our stand in the Vale.
Studio lights on the same power bar, so he can turn the whole setup on and off at the same time. A kind of obvious yet still clever trick that inspired me to rewire the lights that I have over my workbench. So get this idea. The video ends with James cataloging a litany of reasons why he doesn't have as much time for AVGN as he used to. In addition to this behind-the-scenes video, James has an autobiography, a movie-making nerd, which he self-published in 2022. These glimpses James allows into his private life have become the locus of an entire para-audience of cheap-watchers, Cinemassacre troopers, who have memified and dissected them to truly bizarre levels of hostility and entitlement that I don't particularly care to fully unwind. It's the usual soup of in-jokes piled on in-jokes piled on in-jokes. Almost as compelling as Wolf himself is this community that swirls around him, seemingly offended by his continual existence, though they will absolutely take offense to that characterization and insist that they're not hateful, fatphobic misogynists, they're just too edgy for woke soy boys, and it is merely their unwavering commitment to free speech that compels them to allow the hateful, fatphobic misogynists to stick around. Broadly, has provided them with a lot of red meat. Mike Matai, who handled moderation of the studio's social presence for years, is kinda an edgy dickhead himself who would pick fights, go on aimless banning sprees, and other misbehavior. He once posted a photo of a penis, not necessarily his penis, but certainly framed to imply that it was his penis, to his Twitter account to win a literal dick measuring contest with rowdy commenters. In the shame-soaked aftermath, he tried to scrub this event from history, and as the moderator of the Cinemassacre subreddit, went on a banning spree there, which led to the formation of the mentions that he has not, in fact, made his millions. That during the time where AVGN was at its peak cultural relevance, their ability to monetize that success was pretty spotty. Their relationship with YouTube as a platform wasn't the best, and while they were able to be grandfathered into the now long-defunct director program and retain their ability to post videos longer than 10 minutes, they weren't in the first, or even second, or even third wave of channels admitted to the partner program. Merchandising, the publication contract with game trailers, and various one-off contracts provided an income that made AVGN viable as a job, but James claims, and I'm inclined to believe, that this did not manifest as the kind of wealth drawn in by the likes of Smosh, Shane Dawson, and other early YouTube contemporaries. James is justifiably proud of AVGN the movie, a film that by all rights shouldn't exist, that should have fallen apart, that very well could have ruined the channel, ruined his finances for the rest of his life, ruined his marriage, and ruined his friendships. A lot of people helped make the movie, but very few championed it. AVGN the movie, for all its faults, isn't the product of a miracle. It's the product of James Rolfe. And it nearly destroyed them. So I have this theory that in 2014, when the movie did not manifest greener pastures, when James realized that he kind of hated making movies at that scale and was loaded up on credit card debt from finishing the movie, someone at Screenwave said, we can fix your monetization problems. Because what follows in 2015 through 2022 is just an absolute frenzy of content. Podcasts, clip compilations, panel shows, roundtables, blogs, full season videos, basically every form of content possible that could either be offloaded entirely to an outside editor or would otherwise maximize efficiency. Stuff that takes an hour to record and 40 minutes to edit. Cinemassacre goes from publishing a little over one video per week in 2013 to publishing 5 videos a week in 2017. In order to facilitate this, a new cast of subjects very suddenly. Screenwave employees who are already on the clock and don't have scheduling conflicts or other jobs that they would need to work around to do a podcast and 2 panel shows. People were convenient. Cinemassacre through Screenwave became visibly extremely corporate extremely quickly. And remember, James doesn't see the channel as the angry video game nerd, he sees it as Cinemassacre, the production house. So while this transition made sense to him, it made less sense to his fans, since all of these secondary videos would show that their subscriptions were not just AVGN. When you see the channel has a panel show where James is only an occasional guest, the narrative of a corporate takeover, of James selling out, writes itself. But, like, none of this would matter if it were good. If the podcast is entertaining, no one's going to care that Justin, Kieran, and Ryan suddenly show up out of nowhere or that James isn't the main focus. But it's not good, because these dudes they bring in are a void of charisma with basically no on-screen chemistry. Because the reason they're there is convenience.
Recently, I took the old website and I made a big document of every single article that was on the old website and what YouTube video it goes to, or whether that video is like lost and we would have to get it from the sources. So I have this like huge map and I gave it to Justin and Kieran and all of them, and they're gonna start digging through that or having someone dig through that and start uploading some of the old stuff like all the Turtle Tuesdays and all of that stuff.
The goal, not about those. We have to do the WordPress stuff. The goal is to get Monster Madness on there fully finalized. Also, like, James just isn't very good at spontaneous conversation. He's not a strong podcast host, but he's the star of the show. He's the person people are tuning in for, which makes a chatty podcast format a really bad choice. It's a product showing the star of the show in the worst light possible. Then there's James' dad rock band, Rex Viper, named after a joke character from the Big Rigs Over the Road Racing episode of AVGN. Rex Viper is so insubstantial a project that it would bear if it weren't for the fact that James, and James alone, seems to take it really seriously and talks about it like it's important. The sum total performances and 4 music videos for parody songs that are just songs from 80s movies with lyrics sometimes retooled to throw in video game references or the instrumentation altered to mix in game themes. Eye of the Tiger Electronics, Mighty Wings and Nintendo Power. I'm gonna be honest, I hate this entire genre. I am the last person to give it a fair shake, so I'm just gonna move on. All of this is easy pickings for truthers, whether it be the cringe or the cynicism. There's a lot here to make fun of. Truthers even have a name for all of them, the Slav wave era. Get it? Because Justin Silverman is fat and Kieran Fallon has that heavy metal going on. Ultimately, though, no matter what the Cinemassacre troop might be accurate about, it's all just a vehicle for ableism, fatphobia, sexism, transphobia, and but they're chan trolls. It's not that deep. They are, in fact, just haters. They have a particular hate boner for James's white faithful for reasons that are complicated but not complex. They'll frame it that James was dragged kicking and screaming from his basement because she wanted kids. They cast James as a henpecked husband whose career was derailed by a woman. This flies in the face of both everything James has ever said and also just observable reality. James and April were together before the first AVGN episode hit YouTube. There is no Garden of Eden for Eve and Carnage. April has been here the whole time. During the filming of AVGN the movie, she moved with James to LA for 6 months and took on the role of production manager. If the movie had one champion, it was James. If it had a second, it was April. But because he describes her as giving him an ultimatum about having kids, they are able to depict it as browbeating, vilifying April as a nagging shrew who uses their children as a chain to keep James from realizing his ambitions, as though it is preposterous on its face that James might honestly prefer fatherhood to making videos for the internet. One time, James and Mike sat down to record a Let's Play, and James had somewhere he needed to be to pick up his kids from swim lessons or something, which gave him a hard out of 5:40 if he was going to get there on time. 5:40 came and went. James started to visibly panic when he noticed the time and wound up leaving rather ungracefully before finishing the LP later in the evening alone.
Shit.
Break it.
Alright. Well, anyway, that's it. We just ran out of time because I have to be done at 5:40 right now.
So what's gonna happen is
Exactly 5:40.
next time you see this, James is gonna beat this on his own,
I'll try, yeah.
without me, because the way we record stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, just to make it clear, again, what happened was that we ran out of time.
Truthers have clung to 540 as a meme ever since. These are what James describes as comments of an asshole-ish variety. And really, the thing with the 2021 behind-the-scenes video, the odd texture of the whole thing, isn't that it's partially a response to these comments, but that all of it is. That's the animating force behind it. That's the reason why it exists. It's not a behind-the-scenes room tour for the sake of content. It's an explanation, a defense. As a room tour, it's bad. James bounces from odd detail to odd detail, spends tremendous amounts of time outlining problems, and the whole of it is weird and a nearly incomprehensible level of honesty about his bespoke inefficiencies, but all because it's a defense of Screenwave, a defense of his wife, a defense of his children, and a defense of his priorities in life.
So, Screenwave hooked me up. So Screenwave set me up with a whole new server. Screenwave also helped me with my internet. Screenwave and I have been working to resolve it. He just did the rest of post-production and effects.
So why doesn't James have enough time anymore? What's he spending his time doing if not making AVGN? I don't know, and I honestly don't particularly care. If AVGN has declined in some spiritual way, it's not because James isn't grinding away with burnout-inducing 16-hour days. And watching through all 52 hours of nerd videos in reverse chronological order, I'm not even convinced that there is some calculable decline. Maybe this is to its detriment, but the show has always been spotty and kind of ragged at the edges, and has remained incredibly consistent in that zone. Maybe the format is just dated. YouTube has left ABGN behind. Maybe the audience is just aging out. Maybe James does lack ambition, or he's just out of ideas. Hell, maybe it is his wife and kids getting in the way of the show. But here's my hot take on that. That's fine. The angry video game nerd is not a load-bearing pillar of reality. It's a YouTube sketch comedy. It doesn't need to exist. I do not know James Rolfe, but in this I'm confident. James Rolfe loves his wife and kids, and they are his top priority. The best written parts of his autobiography, by a substantial margin, are the stories about the challenging births of his two daughters and how he discovered that he really enjoys being a father. His mistake was to share that fact with an audience too immature to comprehend it. No, not just too immature. An audience patently unwilling to comprehend it. Probably the most baffling mistake James has made is assume that his haters are here to be persuaded. Do they want me to suffer? Yeah, James, they kind of do. But still, like, mistakes have been made. Like, what's the point of having a company to handle all this stuff if James is going to make a video where he tries to do his own PR response to his haters by showing off his janky DIY rigging? Why employ editors if they're going to leave in the footage where he has a humiliating panic attack? Well, anyway, part of what is so transfixing in all of this is this parade of contradictions, that from the outside there are these very visible, very public decisions.
Oh yes, Arkham.
But those decisions,
This is the oldest home of the Ezomites as we know ourselves.
even without access to the
Past generations departed from here to settle Ezomir and the Isles of Scorn. We did not always call this part of Farrell our homeland. And now the Eternals have come with their armies and laid claim to this place. It'll be a cold day in the Vastiri desert before we submit.
In a spiritual sense, James has trapped himself on the couch. His access to the capital resources needed for larger projects is dwindling, and his sensibilities as a filmmaker are too myopic to appeal to an audience that isn't humoring him, telling him that Rex Viper is cute. They're just glad he's having fun. In a more literal sense, James has trapped himself on the couch because the room is just too small. I had heard this before, but I find that just saying it or looking at frame
Before Farrell. Ah, the songs aren't clear after so much time. A great many generations ago, we were driven here from elsewhere. There was simply too much corruption, too much darkness. It was a time of chaos and terror, and much was lost. Our clan swore that this was the last time we would ever be cast out of our homes. Rise up, Ezomites! We shall drive off these eternal bastards! The consort? Oh, Asinia. Curse the foul witch! She mired our lands with hexes upon our graves, so the dead may not die. She was but a servant girl to the Praetor's family. It was said she poisoned his first wife, aspired to replace her. She succeeded, and Draven, he was not dismayed by the darkness in her, he embraced it, and together they conspired in their vile ambitions. Lonely, so lonely.
Our victory is never complete, so long as the Ezamites resist us. Let this graveyard erase their stain on the land.
It's still a bad solution. It still looks visibly like a bad solution, but it felt personal. I can imagine myself as James, self-conceptualizing as not an indie filmmaker, but as a backyard filmmaker. A kid with no resources but what he can scrounge out of the garage. And this felt far more homogenous with that than with any other James I had considered so far. In 2010, James posted an autobiographical documentary called The Dragon in My Dreams. James tells a story of a recurring nightmare he had as a child, being borne down on by this massive dragon. An image that he connects to a dragon-shaped water feature in a neighborhood park his parents took.
Gun!
Voiceover, he reflects on his childhood on upcoming milestone turning 30. Holding back tears, he takes it to the dragon and avows himself to elemental example of pretentious, self-important film school path, but whatever. Let use without cringe. In a way, the dragon in my dreams is itself a brutal metaphor for James's career. James is a calcified dragon whose films have barely changed between high school and middle age, uprooted from VHS and transplanted 30 feet away in HD. I do such every day. Every time I have to step over something that's in a bad position, every time I need to get something off a shelf and there's stands or tripods or boxes in the way. Every stack of
I'm carrying enough already.
getting spooked by their own shadows. The show task or just getting
Hello. Hello. It's beautiful. I accept. Goodbye.
So-called cinematic platformers. Many games are considered classics because of the way they elevated games as an art form, took it seriously, and confronted audiences with complex, sober stories. does lend the game a certain weight. When you drop down off a ledge with your pistol charged ice tube, it's super badass. Yeah, take that, you fucks. The second thing you notice is the control. Personal shield that can absorb a certain number of shots. Okay, so that's health by a different name. So to check your health, you need to open your inventory and cycle through everything you're carrying until you get to your shield mod, where it will tell you how many charges you have. Oh yeah, that's cinematic. Cinematic is dog parts. Yeah, it turns out that in video games, cinematic...
By Garukan! Break a sweat. Inhuman beast! I must travel light. I'm carrying enough already.
Looking at is Decentraland, conceived by Argentine developers Esteban Urbano and Ari Mellick as a virtual reality world for unconstrained markets, presently advertising itself as a decentralized metaverse owned by its users. In the pitch version, Decentraland is a true virtual space, a whole new parallel world that you access via virtual reality, a world where you can shop, find things, invest, with the language of finance.
I'm carrying enough already.
Yes. Hello.
Scarcity is so pervasive that it's almost a waste of time to mention it, but the land token centers a lot of the discussion of Decentraland around the fact that the value of land in the event that Decentraland won the future and became the Manhattan of the metaverse, the go-to destination for virtual life. Its buyers will overwhelmingly into cryptocurrency or financial services, or just living on land and renting it out later. This is all baked in.
Best not do that here.
Sorry, I was just... Oh, I like this one.
Developing trade without limits. Make genuine connections. Earn real money. Decentraland. Platform powered by blockchain. My land. Some experience. Transform ways.
The great sword Agnar is currently in Count Gianor's possession. But the mighty rune blade was not always his to wield. It is an ancient weapon of the old magics, inspired by the great wolf himself. Legend says it was forged and runed for the original clan leader so he might lead his people to a new, safer land. This brought them to Farrell, where they founded Ogham. Ever since, Agnar was passed down to the leader of the strongest clan. When the position of Count was established in Ogham, the sword was bound to the roll. But now, Gianor sullies his remarkable history with his misdeeds. I hope I will live to see the day when someone worthy takes up the sword once more.
They are late arriving parasites. They will typically nod their heads at any metaverse vision before throwing it back at you with their crypto junk grafted onto it. They don't care about the form or content of the metaverse, but both crypto and the metaverse require spontaneous mass adoption to make sense, so the two are somewhat simpatico.
I understand you did what you had to. Please, let us not speak of it further. I survive, but all that I was is gone. Count Gianor has only been growing more and more cruel with his justice. He arrested my father for bringing in the harvest one day late, and the rest of my family scattered and fled as the soldiers came for them. I was away when it happened, but my neighbors warned me on my way home, and I fled. Clearfell is as far as I could go before the dangers of the forest closed in. There is scant hope in my heart for my father, but I must believe my mother and my two younger brothers escaped, even though my heart tells me that they are just songs now. I keep longing for a ray of light to cut through the darkness of these bleak days. Bye.
They look at the market for live service video games and translating that business model to reality. Rather than building a reified virtual world, digital fashion. On TikTok's hat filter. In this definition, the metaverse isn't another place, conceptual or otherwise. It's just a name for the digital scheme. We strongly believe that closing things today is being don't shop less. Shop digital fashion. Don't shop less. Don't shop less. Don't dare shop less. Don't you. There are numerous problems here, which boil down to the fact that all of these have equal claim to the word metaverse. If you comb through dozens and dozens of definitions of the metaverse, you can assemble a web of broad attributes where some are generally agreed upon, while others border on confusion.
Sorry, I was...
It's a vague, largely incoherent cloud of ideas, malleable enough that anything can be called part of the metaverse, a proto-metaverse,
Another for my collection. Stay safe, if you can.
The Sandbox is the metaverse. Horizon World is the metaverse. Roblox is the metaverse. Fortnite is the metaverse. Minecraft is the metaverse. The Lint experience is the metaverse. I look at my 14-year-old, and she has spent the last year and a half living in the metaverse. She doesn't even know that word, right? But her school is on Zoom. She hangs out with her friends online in one form or another. Actually, in a whole bunch of different forms, right? In Instagram, in TikTok, in iMessage, in Fortnite, in Animal Crossing, all of these different metaverses, right? Some leaders within the virtual world space, such as TeamSpeak, believe eventually every company will need to operate their own multi-standing planets at this fundamental platforms such as Fortnite and Minecraft. It's really its potential. Just as every company a few decades
before me.
Of course, this flexibility provides there's no consensus definition because the metaverse is not an actual thing that anyone's really building. It's a rhetorical device that allows people to gesture at the future and pontificate on present political and social value. To understand that the metaverse is a distinct invention or construct by or philosophy, all of this becomes a lot. It's also the aforementioned gesturing towards fiction, and because a lot of people claim to have today in the form of blockchain are, for the most part, that's not to say things could or should exist, just that most not considered actual. That part is it's always super cool in stories, so why even bother considering that the end result might be boring, inconvenient, and disappointing? Now, it's fun to point to all the devices that exist today that were first sketched out by a picture but it's also a matter of survival. Sure, some speculation become real. But even more get discarded as silly, useless, impractical, deadly, or physically impossible. This might come as a shock, but when a writer sits down to compose fiction, the thing that they write doesn't need to actually work. They're not real inventions, they're narrative devices, and at a certain point, no amount of cool factor can make up for the limitations of physical space. Star Trek's holodeck is an insane idea, and dear God, do I wish it were real. But it can't exist not as depicted because it's not an invention. It's a collection of camera tricks and special effects. At the end of the day, the holodeck's limitations and lack thereof are dictated by narrative necessity. So when Neil Stephenson writes about the metaverse in Snow Crash in 1992,
now, your soul will join my steeple of death. Rend your soul. Your soul is mine. These spirits are mine. Cut down. My beloved Asinia, cut down.
At your request.
Rend your soul. Perish. Cut down. Your soul is mine. Your meaningless life ends now. The spirits yearn. Asinia, joining will be punished.
At your request.
Your meaningless life ends now. Your intrusion will be punished. Your meaningless life ends now. Asinia! Succumb to
At your request.
I will end your meaningless life. Cut down. Rend your soul. Your soul is...
Your demise is welcomed. I am sure of it.
Reality. VR is pretty cool tech. I really like it. It's also pretty limited, or more specifically, the tech runs up against a pretty big barrier, which is the human body. The inner ear really doesn't like moving without actually moving, which means that every VR application is a series of compromises between the immersive potential of VR and what the body tolerate.
No? Oh god. Oh god.
Because Stevenson's metaverse is a plot device, effectively an alternate dimension, the characters are able to navigate the space however Stevenson wants them to. And because it's narratively interesting, when the characters want to get from one part of the metaverse to another, they need to traverse the distance between those 2 points. Paul, for his part, concedes the users of the inevitable metaverse would likely find this to be too inconvenient and prefer to teleport from location to location. The reality is even more restricted. The compromise is that overwhelmingly virtual reality experiences are largely static experiences, with freeform movement around a small footprint, with the user teleporting from spot to spot, even within the same virtual room. It's a compromise that VR enthusiasts are willing to accept because the alternative is a one-way trip to the floor as your cochlea decides that being upright is no longer an option. The end result, the actuality of virtual reality, is that it's an incredibly potent tool for an unfortunately limited number of applications. This creates a very sharp contrast between the metaverse and the reality of it's continuing to insist that a vast, contiguous space representing the internet is not only a desirable
I must travel light.
but a referential way. How this manifests is a metaverse that exists overwhelmingly in the form of blog posts about the inevitability of its existence, with anything tangentially related to virtual reality being encircled as part of the metaverse, along with a whole lot of stuff hardly related at all. Of particular fascination is the way that this is all talk and no product. Link USA, manufacturers of terrible chocolate truffles, launched their metaverse store in November 2022. And just have a look at the language used to describe it. Link USA launches its first ever 3D virtual store with Beyond XR, its shopping, chocolate, true, innovative experience. Famous master chocolate beers and Shaja. Best of all, the immersive store is totally comprehensible. We at Link USA are thrilled to offer customers this state-of-the-art experience just in time for the holidays. While there's no experience in walking into one of our beautiful stores in person, our online store is no different. We're excited to show it off. This is all pretty routine corporate fluff, though the surprising and telling thing is that it's just words. There's few, if any, images included, and there's a reason why. The whole of it is elevated to transcendental when you see the actual thing that they're describing. A laggy, hideous, cheap PoE2 website would probably be a can hit if it were pitched instead as a throwback to FMV video games from the 90s. The vast majority of these so-called metaverse offerings are virtual spaces only insofar as they are painted to resemble a store. We already tried this 25 years ago and started it because it turns out the human brain can shop from a list of items or create photos far better